Martin here. Right on. Third video post of the day. Perhaps the moment you've all been waiting for. Um, I'll tell you guys my story of my dramatic escape. Third attempt, first successful attempt at escaping from jail, or what I'll call jail. And so here's the story of my escape. So I've been at Rose Hill Rehabilitation Center for I want to say 9 months, 10 months, and I've been dating and engaged to this my fiance Diane for about a month. Let's see, 2 months, and dating her, and basically my first, how long was it? Maybe 7 months there. I didn't really get in any trouble or break. I won't say I didn't break any rules. I was breaking most, if not all, of the rules while I was there the entire time. However, in the last few months, they started enforcing the rules strictly, and I was entirely opposed to the rules, and so at least for the last month or month and a half that I was there, this is during the month of March, coronavirus month, and February of this year, 2020, I've been getting threats of getting kicked out. They gave me a 30-day notice saying, if you can't abide by these rules in the next 30 days, you'll get kicked out. I've been getting threats of having my medication changed due to seasonal changes in mood due to warmer weather, which turns out is one of my worst case scenarios. I've had medications I've taken several different antipsychotics and several different mood stabilizers, and especially for the antipsychotics, every time I switched an antipsychotic for another one, I had to kind of start from square one and rediscover who I was on this new drug and find comfort in my own skin on this new drug. And some of them are heavily sedating. So this was one of my two worst case scenarios at this point, was having to start a whole new medication. And then finally, I was getting threatened with the potential of getting sent to the hospital if I get kicked out for doing something against the rules. And this would have been an even worse outcome, starting totally entirely back at square one. And these two worst case scenarios, changing meds and getting sent to the hospital, were for me at this point where I had just overcome all these mental health, 6 mental health disorders or diseases in 10 months, and these were threatening to be putting me back at square one. So they were to be avoided at all costs. So here we are, April Fool's Day, April 1st, 2020, and I had just eaten dinner with Diane, and I went back to my bedroom, took a nap. I realized that I still had some time to go to the gym and that I wanted to work out, so I went searching for my headphones in my room, and after digging through my entire room, I had realized that my $300 Bose earbuds were stolen from my room. Um, so at this moment, this marked my second pair of headphones that had been stolen in as many weeks. And basically, these two sets of headphones combined, Bose over ear noise canceling and a Bose earbud noise canceling headphones, totaled about $1,000 worth of stolen goods from me. Um, so not only was I late to the gym, but I was furious because my second and last pair of headphones had been stolen. Um, and when I get angry, I don't know if this happens to anyone else out there or not, or if this is human nature or not. But I like to throw things. When I was in high school, we had a lacrosse goal in our backyard on our tennis court, and I would always find if I had to release some anger, I could go out, throw a lacrosse ball into the net as hard as I could, um, shoot it as hard as I could into the net. Excuse me, and until my arm got tired, and then once I was through with that, I had pretty much released all my anger. Um, so in this instance, I picked up a coffee mug and threw it against the wall, and it shattered um, right before I walked out of the bedroom door to go to the gym. So I go to the gym, I work out, I shoot, and I start shooting hoops. I shoot hoops for about 10 minutes until 8 o'clock comes around, when they tell me uh, that they had been, the staff comes and tells me that she had been there for 2 hours and that she was closing down and that she had done her job, and proceeded to turn off the lights on me while I was still on the basketball court. My phone was over in the corner of the gym playing music, and so I had to go locate my cell phone in the dark. Um, and then I put my phone in my pocket and walked back to the Kelly Center within Rose Hill Residential Rehabilitation Center. And as I was walking up to the building, I was confronted and followed by an administrative staff. And mind you, this is 8 p.m. on a weekday. So administrative staff generally works from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. and doesn't really have any reason to be there at 8:15, 8:30 p.m. She starts following me around. I'm pissed off because I thought the gym had been open till 8:30, or was supposed to be open till 8:30 p.m., which it had been for the first 9 months that I'd been there. And so I walked down the stairs, past the pool table, checked the calendar to see if it really is supposed to close at 8 p.m. The calendar says something about 7 p.m., 7 to 8, or something like that. So I figure they changed the time due to coronavirus to closing a half hour earlier. I walk back up the steps and notice I'm still being followed by this lady, Laura, from administration. And so I go outside, I sit on the bench in front of the building, and she comes out and sits on an adjacent bench. And I ask her, like, are you following me? Like, why? It's kind of weird. Why are you following me? And she basically confesses and said, yeah, I'm following you. I'm trying not to, but I am. And she says, there's some broken glass in your room, and we need to go, like, something along the lines of, like, did you break glass in your room or something? And I said, no, that's not possible. There's no broken glass in my room. And this was kind of a white lie, because the mug that I had broken, and at this moment I was like, I was pretty pissed at her, because I had been getting harassed and followed around by staff at different points for the whole month, 2 months before this, leading up to this, and I've been getting threats of getting kicked out, and like I said, changing medications, or even worse, getting sent to the hospital. So I said no, and in the back of my head I was saying, well, what I really broke was a coffee mug, and coffee mugs are made of, aren't made of glass. So I said no. Said that's not possible, and then I realized, oh shit, like, I'm getting kicked. She's in administration, like, she's not even supposed to be here. She's following me around. They're totally gonna change my meds. Either change my meds, send me to the hospital, kick me out to the hospital, and one of my two worst case scenarios is gonna happen. So I have to get out of here. I have to get out of here now, because those two worst case scenarios are to be avoided at all costs, or else I'll be sent back to square one after a miraculous recovery in about 9 or 10 months. So I ran, and I ran as far as I could. This campus was on 200 acres of farmland, woods / forest, and swampland. So I ran to the forest as far as I could, as deep as I could. And I ran, and I ran, and I ran until I got exhausted. I ran past a hunting tree house in the woods, where it had a roof on it. So I thought about the possibility that I could spend the night there, and then wake up extremely early in the morning and find a way to escape campus before anyone woke up. But I kept going, kept running. Eventually I settled down and sat behind a tree until the sun went down. And I'll show you what I was wearing that night. I was wearing these shorts, and I had on this jacket, which is the liner to my Burton ski jacket. I think it's real down, so it's pretty warm. And I'll show you what. Oh, the last thing I had with me was a travel kit toothbrush. So I had shorts on, shoes, Nike shoes, Air Max, that were fortunately pretty old, and I could spare trash in them. I had this toothbrush kit, which has plackers for flossing, travel size toothpaste, and a toothbrush all inside of it. And This is actually the toothpaste I'm still using today. And this was inside my coat pocket right here. I had my cell phone. Shoes and socks and shorts and t-shirt. And that was it. However, my cell phone didn't have service. My parents had canceled both my bank account, which includes my debit card, and my SIM card and mobile plan. So I had a cell phone but no service. And fortunately it was pretty well charged. I used it as a flashlight, and so here I am sitting behind a tree in the middle of the woods, my third worst case scenario. And when my parents were telling me they were going to cancel my cell plan, I actually told them, like, and the reason they did this was in case I ran away. I told them, if you cancel this, like, I could end up in the middle of the woods with no idea where I am, with no cell phone to call anyone or find my way out. And here I am in that exact situation that I had described to them 1 month prior. As it turned out, I was smart enough to find my way out. So I'll tell you the rest of the story. I'm sitting there, and the coyotes are howling. There are these huge birds up at the tops of the trees, and as soon as I would walk up to the tree, they would fly away, making this flapping noise. I don't know if they were crows or turkeys or what, but they were huge and noisy. And so I was at a decision point. I had to decide, should I sleep outside for the night with the coyotes, and then escape to the road early in the morning before anyone was awake, or B, do I escape to the highway now, or try to escape to the highway now? So at first, the only decision I made was I need to get further away from this campus and get deeper into the woods, and so that's what I did. I kept going deeper. Eventually, I decided that I could see the lights from Rose Hill from across the lake, and across the lake was pretty far, somewhere that I'd certainly never been, and I was on the opposite end of the lake and deep into the woods, but I could still see the lights, and the lights reflecting off the water of the lake. That I could try to make a mental map and locate either the road that leads to the highway or the highway itself. Because I had escaped to the highway once before on one of my 2 failed attempts. And so that's what I did, basically. I used those lights as a reference point as to what direction I had left or exited the property of Rose Hill Rehabilitation Center the first time I tried escaping, which was New Year's Day, January 1st of this year. And then I remembered that I had taken a right, because at this point I still had GPS on my phone. I had taken a right as soon as I left the driveway or the boulevard and then taking the very next right. And so I kind of triangulated where the highway should be from where I am. And I used my eyes, I used my ears, I used my flashlight to get through, to just walk. I basically just put my head down and said, I'm gonna get to the highway right now. I'm gonna find it. Find my way out of this 200 acres of land. Find my way to the highway, no matter what it takes. Put my head down, started walking, and after about the third time balancing on the log, walking across a marsh or swamp waters, trying to balance so that I could walk across it without going through the water and getting soaked. I slipped and fell off the log and ended up probably knee deep in swamp water. And the mud was like sinking mud. My shoe fell off, got sucked into the mud. And so I yanked the shoe out of the mud, took off my other shoe, and just started plowing through swamp waters for probably an hour. Swamp waters, bushes, forests, farmland, in socks and shorts. I was soaked up to my waist. It was pitch dark outside, except for my torch toggle on my phone, or the flash. And so yeah, there's trees, thorn bushes, barbed wire, fences, downed trees, and waist deep swamp, sinking mud at the bottom of the swamp, and on top of all that, it was 33 degrees outside. Finally, I located, with my ears and my eyes, I located where I figured had to be the highway. I could see a flashing light pulsing in the sky, and every once in a while there'd be car headlights passing by, and I figured it was either the road that leads to the highway or the highway itself. So I just made a beeline straight for that. And I didn't care what nature obstacles came at me on that straight line path to that road. And finally, after 3 barbed wire fences and all this wilderness, soaking wet, I show up on the highway, and I don't know which direction is which direction I should go in, which direction has more traffic flowing in that direction, that I'm be more likely to get picked up as a hitchhiker in. So I ended up crossing the highway back and forth a couple times, settled on one side, started waving my flashlight phone in the air, and got picked up by a couple, maybe within 20 minutes, covered in mud. My my shorts were covered in burrs and thorns. I was all scratched up. I still have some scratches on me. My legs were covered in mud. My hands were covered in mud. My arms were covered in mud. My shoes were covered in mud and soaked. My socks were soaked, covered in mud. There was mud inside my shoes, but I threw on my shoes so that I looked like I had shoes on, so that I would have shoes on. And I got picked up by a couple. Um, and the first thing they do is said, "Do you have a piece on you?" Um, which means a gun. And I said, "No." And he said, "Can I search you?" So I said, "Yes." All I have is a cell phone and a toothbrush, and so he patted down my jacket. I didn't have a gun. He let me in the car. His girlfriend was sitting in the passenger seat, and we start driving. And he starts hitting it. The driver starts hitting a vape, and I said, "Is that a THC vape?" Because I had seen one on Instagram. Um, Actually, I got messaged a message, an inbox message, offering to sell me one from some random guy uh, who I guess is selling them. And I said, "Is that a THC vape?" And he said, "No, it's nicotine." And then his girlfriend goes, "But we have an oil rig right here." And she showed it to me. Oil rigs are for like uh, vaporizing THC wax, I think. And anyways, he hands me the vaporizer. Meanwhile, this is like the peak of coronavirus time. Um, but I take it and I hit the vape a few times, pass it back to him, um, say thank you for that. His girlfriend turns on the Wi-Fi hotspot for me on her phone so that I can kind of use Google Maps and the internet for a couple minutes, and they turn on some music, and they drop me off at a liquor store in Clarkston, and they tell me if I need a ride to Flint in the morning, they'll probably be heading out there at around 11 a.m. if I can find a place to stay for the night. So I go into the gas station, or I'm not the gas station, the liquor store, look around. It's supposed to be, they told me it was like a family liquor store and that they should be able to help me out. Um, I bum a cigarette from someone in the parking lot, smoke a cigarette outside, and then eventually one of the people working in the liquor store, and this is the first time I saw it. I'd seen this or been inside a store since the quarantine. Uh, the worker came out in a face mask and said, "You can't really be hanging out in our parking lot." And I asked him, "Do you know any shelters in the area or somewhere I could crash for the night?" And he said, "No, but there's a gas station down the road, about 2 miles, and they might know." So I walked 2 miles to the gas station, went inside, decided to wash off my arms and my hands. Um, Asked that I figured um, if I couldn't find a shelter from this gas station attendant, perhaps this would be a high traffic gas station where truck drivers would come through and maybe I could hitch a ride with one of them. I asked him if he knew of a shelter. He said no. I asked him if trucks come through this gas station a lot. He said no. So I left and went back to the highway, which was just down the street from this gas station, um, that I just spent probably 40 minutes walking to in the cold, soaking wet. And I get picked up by a couple. They, just like the first car, they didn't really have much space for me except for a small opening in the back seat. Um, I get in. They ask me where I'm trying to go. I tell them either Flint or Pontiac, Michigan. This was in at this moment I was in Clarkston, Michigan. Um, and so they said that it can take me to Pontiac that night. That they were from, I think they were from Clarkston, but that they would take me to Pontiac. So on the way to Pontiac, they call a shelter for me. they find that it's open, or it'll be open the next day at like 5 p.m., between 5 and 7. Or no, they just find that it'll be open the next day. Um, they give me $3.50 for a bus ride to Flint the next day if necessary. They gave me the name of a shelter and the name of St. Vincent de Paul, which they said if the shelter didn't work out, that St. Vincent de Paul would put me up for a week in a hotel. They stop at McDonald's, buy themselves some food, buy me a McChicken and a large coffee, and then they put me up in a motel for about $57 that night. So I was extremely grateful to them. Props to both of these couples who picked me up for their hospitality and care. Excuse me. And so I go into the motel room. The wife comes and pays with her credit card and wishes me good luck. I go into the motel room on the second story. Take off my clothes, take a hot shower, try to clean off some of the mud off my clothes, and try to go to bed. And I found that the heater was broken in the bedroom. The only thing that worked on the heating unit was the fan. Fortunately, it was 60 degrees in there all night. I could tell by looking at the thermostat that it was 60 degrees, but it still felt freezing. I had like a felt green blanket with holes all over it on my bed. It was a bigger bed than I was used to sleeping in, which was nice. So I put my underwear and probably my t-shirt, or maybe just my underwear, over the heater, which was blowing air, and ate the McChicken, saved the coffee for the morning, turned on the TV, closed the blinds, put on my jacket, and went to sleep. And I ended up checking out at about noon, drank my coffee, and headed out toward the shelter. On the way to the shelter is about a 2-mile walk from the motel. I stopped to check out the Army-Navy store, not realizing that everything was shut down due to the quarantine. So I got there, it was closed. I went into a Walgreens, I think, maybe to see if I could get a cigarette or something, or buy a pack of cigs, or I don't know. I didn't have any money for cigs. I don't remember exactly why I went into Walgreens, but I didn't end up buying anything. And finally, I got to the shelter. When I got to the shelter, someone answered the door, and they told me that to get into the shelter, first of all, you had to make an appointment to kind of have an interview. And that second of all, they were closed and they're not accepting more people due to the coronavirus. I asked him, this was at Grace Hope Shelter in downtown Pontiac. I asked him, and I don't blame the guy for not knowing this. I asked him if there's any other shelters in the area, and he said no. So I decided to go to the bus station that I fortunately had been given cash for the night before by the second couple that picked me up, and decided to find the bus to Pontiac. When I got to the bus station, there was a man there, and I asked him for a cigarette. He didn't have one. I asked him, um, how do I get to Flint? What bus goes to Flint? He told me you take the Baldwin bus to, I think it was bus 357 to Great Lakes Crossing, and then pick up a second bus from there to Flint. It turns out the buses were free, running for free due to coronavirus, because they didn't want you to get within 6 feet of the driver to pay them. There were people selling drugs at the bus stop. I think someone hit their liquor, the drug dealer's liquor, and immediately vomited from the bus shelter next to them. Came over, gave them like $1 to hit some of their liquor, took a sip, and immediately ran to the grass and vomited, and then came back and asked for more, which I think he held down the second time. And then I waited there for about 2 hours. I stood outside there for 2 hours. Not sure if the bus was going to come or not. Finally, it did come. And I arrived at Great Lakes Outlet Mall on a free bus ride. And there I waited for about an hour. I heard about someone. I heard someone talking on the phone who was in the bus station shelter, talking about how she had gone to McDonald's. So I looked around and I noticed a drive-through about 300 feet away. So after waiting for an hour, I was pretty hungry. I walked over to the drive-through, walked up to the window. Or at first I tried going to the intercom and asking for an order, but they didn't hear me. So I walked up to the first window. They sent me to the second window. The second window sent me back to the first window. But long story short, they let me purchase 2 McChickens from them on foot, which was much appreciated. I spent 2 of the $4 that I realized I had on my person on McChickens. I came back to the bus station, and this man asked me where I was going. I said I was going to Flint to go to a shelter because I got kicked out. I said I got kicked out by my parents. I didn't want to tell him a super long story. He said he was going to Detroit, and eventually we kind of both realized that the buses weren't really running on schedule, at least. But he told me that right before he left the bus station on foot to get picked up, I think by someone else, that there was a shelter just down the street if I had gotten on the bus that I had taken from downtown Pontiac to get to that outlet mall. If I got back on that bus, it would take me to down Baldwin, where there was another shelter. I asked him if he could call them for me and make sure that they're open, which he did, and he said they would be open from 5 to 7, accepting new people. And I was fortunate because I had almost taken a ride from the other lady who was at the bus station, who ended up getting a ride from this man to Flint. I offered to give them $2 for a ride to Flint with them. Fortunately, they didn't have space for me in the car. And so said goodbye and thank you to that guy um, who was headed to Detroit, and he wished me luck. And I waited for the same bus that I'd taken to get to that mall from downtown Pontiac. Um, Hop back on. The same bus driver was the same bus driver who dropped me off, picked me up, and said, "Did that other bus ever come?" I said no. Um, and but that I told her that I had found a shelter on Baldwin. So I hopped on the bus, rode it about 10 stops, got off at Hope Shelter, and by then it was about maybe 3 p.m. or 4 p.m., maybe 3:30, and I walk up and they say, "Come stand outside this door between 5 and 7, and we'll get you set up with a bunk in our shelter." Um, and that's the story of my escape and my arrival at the shelter. And you'll see on my other posts that I've already posted my experience with the shelter and what I learned from living in a shelter for a few days. It was a great experience. Um, I was fortunate that my parents offered me or invited me to come back to their place in Winnetka. Um, and um, but during my time at the shelter, I was fed well. I had a bed of my own. Well, it was a bunk bed, so I had my lower bunk. I was fed. I had a place to sleep that was warm at night. Um, and I was given 3 meals a day with options for getting second. The food was delicious. It was like restaurant food. And on my last day, right before I left, I was given an entire pizza, as was basically everyone else at the shelter, by some good Samaritans who stopped by with a car full of pizzas from Little Caesars. Sorry, my allergies are bothering me right now. But yeah, that's my escape story from jail. And um, the moral of the story is, if where there's a will, there's a way. I put my head down and decided I was going to get to a shelter, that I was going to find a place to sleep for the night, and then I was going to find a shelter the next day. And I came across some good Samaritans and ended up finding a suitable shelter and had a great experience there. So I successfully escaped when I checked into the shelter that night, and then I started to make my bed in my bunk. In my bunk, there a police officer showed up named Officer Corona, and ironically, and he told me they had been flying helicopters around the Rose Hill Rehabilitation Center looking for me, and through the woods. They had people, a search party with flashlights out there in the woods looking for me that night, April 1st. They had posted me as a missing persons on Facebook and on the news. So they really went all out looking for me, that I had no idea. Um, that they would go to that extent looking for me. But fortunately, I made the decision not to stay in the woods for that night and sleep there, and instead find the highway as soon as I could. But he just came, Officer Corona came, put my parents on the phone. He had been in contact with my parents, in contact with Diane, filled me in on what they had been doing to try to find me, told me that I came up as a missing persons when I checked into the shelter, and put me on the phone with my parents to let them know that I was safe, and basically just wanted to make sure in person that I was indeed safe and in a shelter and located and not missing anymore. So he was very kind and courteous, and I guess he had talked to my parents, maybe my sister and Diane. So excuse me. He put me on the phone with my parents and asked me if I needed anything, and then took off, and that was that. So it really couldn't have gone much better. And here I am, happy, healthy, in Winnetka, starting a YouTube career, launching my YouTube career, and I expect to be moving out to California in the next few months, hopefully by my birthday in mid-July, where I'll get an apartment with Diane and take it from there. So thanks for watching. I might have one more post coming today. I'll be posting every day for the next 6 months on a new subject or a different topic. I have tons of content planned out, and sorry for not posting on Easter. I actually did produce 2 videos and publish them, but I ended up taking them down because I didn't like the job I did on those. So there is 1 day gap, even though I said I would do it every day for 6 months. I did do it every day, but I took down the post from Easter. But I'm making it up to you today by posting several videos, and I'll be doing 1 or more every day for the next 6 months. So stay tuned, stay healthy, try not to get caught up in the news with coronavirus, and stay busy. Alright guys, happy Tuesday.